The new Warframe update Jade Shadows Constellations is already coming out next week, bringing a metric ton of new features, so you definitely want to be prepared ahead of time. That's why, in today's video, I'm gonna tell you how to best set up your Warframe account for the new update, and also a couple of reminders on things that are about to end so that you can still snipe them in time before they're gone. Big shoutouts to all our generous channel members who help me keep the lights on, and now, let's jump right into it. But first things first, and most importantly, when does the update actually launch? Jade Shadows Constellations will release on June the 17th, that is Wednesday next week. As per usual, the specific release time wasn't given just yet, but normally they push out new updates between 10 and 11 AM Eastern Time, which would be 4 to 5 in the afternoon for our Central European tenno. The update itself will introduce a whole bunch of stuff, and if you want to learn more about it, then I already have a full video going over the dev stream that introduced all of this. However, the most important message here would be this. A lot of the new stuff is locked behind the brand new story quest, Jade Shadows Constellations. This is a sequel to the original Jade Shadows quest that came out a while ago, and in order to access most of the new stuff, you will have to complete that new story quest. To be able to play that in the first place though, you now have a bit more than 1 week to finish the original Jade Shadows quest in case you haven't done that yet. But alright, the first major point of today's video has to do with Prime weapons and Warframes, because in the next 2 weeks there's surprisingly much happening in the Prime rotation schedule, and believe me, you don't want to miss the right timing here. Let's check it out. The first thing I want to talk about here actually doesn't happen next week with the update, but in 3 days already, and that has to do with the current Prime Resurgence rotation. As per usual, once every month, 2 older Prime Warframes with their respective weapons and accessories will be uncovered from the vault. Right now, this is a very popular rotation with both Rhino Prime as well as Nyx Prime. Rhino, of course, being one of the most popular Warframes in the game, and I'm pretty sure everybody wants to have a Rhino Prime for themselves. However though, Nyx is a little bit underrated in my opinion, and I think more people should give her a try. She's ridiculously strong, almost constantly invincible, and especially with the relatively new secondary arcane that allows you to do AoE damage against irradiated enemies, that turned Nyx into one of the most busted secondary platforms in the entire game. So yeah, what I'm trying to say here is, the currently still available 2 frames, Rhino and Nyx Prime, are ridiculously valuable for pretty much any account out there, and if you haven't gotten them yet, then now you have around about 3 more days of time to get them before they will get vaulted again, at which point you can't farm their relics anymore for a long time. Now, in case you're wondering, how do I get the relics for them? That is relatively simple. The Prime Vault relics that you can see in the background right here, they're actually not directly farmable in the game, but instead you have to buy them with a resource called Aya from Varzia Dax. This Aya resource is kinda sorta like a universal relic, and it drops pretty much everywhere where normal relics also appear. My personal favorite Aya farms would be to buy relic packs from your syndicates, because they can contain Aya. The Void Capture mission Hepid is a very quick run and has a decent chance at least of getting you Aya, and then running open world bounties is usually also a good thing to do, especially if you have business in the open worlds to begin with. If you ask me, I personally think even though you only have 3 more days on the counter here, it should be plenty time to get enough Aya to get all the relics for Rhino and Nyx that you need. Just wanted to mention that before they're gone, because I can imagine that a lot of players would like to have them. As for who will replace them, in 3 days we're gonna have the next rotation including Equinox as well as Wukong Prime. So in case you don't have any business with Rhino and Nyx, you might already want to pre-farm some Aya for these 2 in case you're interested. And before we go on, there's one little more detail I want to mention here, especially for the fashion frame connoisseurs among you. The current Rhino and Nyx rotation not only is very valuable because of these 2 Warframes, but it also includes the, in my opinion, most beautiful armor set in the entirety of Warframe, and that would be the Targus Prime armor set. Now, unfortunately, it being a Prime accessory means that you cannot farm it and you cannot buy it for Platinum. You have to get it for Regal Aya, which you can only purchase from real money. However, if you are one of the tenno who likes to spend a little bit on having a nice drip, then that is something that should definitely be on your radar, so I wanted to include this very piece in the video as well. So much for the Prime Vault. However though, we're still not done with all the Prime business. It's a lot happening right now, because now we come to the actual update. With the release of Jade Shadows Constellations, we will get the next new Prime Warframe in the form of Styanax Prime, I've already talked about it in the dev stream recap. I think he looks absolutely stunning and I can't wait. However though, this also means an older Prime who is currently still available will wander into the vault. And that, if I'm not mistaken, will be Sevagoth Prime, together with his weapon the Epitaph Prime, as well as the Nautilus Prime Sentinel. This is, I think, important to know. In case you want to have Sevagoth Prime but you haven't fully farmed him yet, then you definitely should do that before the update launches, because afterwards his relics will not be available anymore. Also, the Epitaph Prime might be a look too, because it is one of the best primers in the game, but I think especially Nautilus Prime is also a very important item to mention here. Not only is Nautilus one of the most popular Sentinels because he has this nice grouping ability, but also in his Prime version, Nautilus is one of the very few Sentinels in the game who can get to over 1200 shields and therefore trigger Reinforced Bond. Only the Prime Nautilus can get enough shields for this, the normal Nautilus will not be able to do that. That's why I think having Nautilus Prime in specific is a valuable addition to every account. Also here, if you still need to farm any of the items I just mentioned, then the best way to get the relics that you need for them would be to do the Lua Disruption mission for the Neo and Axii relics, the Sedna and Uranus Disruptions for the Mesa relics, as well as the Capture mission Hepit in the Void for the Lith component. These are generally the most efficient farming spots for the corresponding relics, however, they can also drop from relic packs. As for the brand new Prime Warframe Styanax, he will come with the Aphentis as well as the Athadai Prime as his weaponry. So, in case you happen to have any Rivens for the Aphentis or the Athadai, then better don't sell them before the update, because I could imagine the price is going to increase quite a bit once the Prime versions release. And yes, also for the Styanax stuff, the farming spots for the corresponding relics are exactly the same ones that I just mentioned. If you want to pre-farm him though, then you can already stack up the reputation with your syndicates, farm a bunch of Steel Essence, and then pump out those relic packs from the syndicates as well as Teshin once Styanax Prime releases. Also here, selling Prime sets early is one of the best ways to make crazy bank in the game. And as always, if you could leave a quick like for the video, that'd be really nice because it helps me big time with the YouTube algorithm. So thank you so much for your support. But okay, the next point that I want to talk about has to do with the upcoming NIDUS rework. The rework itself and everything that's going to change, we're not going to discuss it in this video. There's a developer workshop in the forums if you want to read into it. However, there are 2 points in preparation of this update that I think are actually pretty important about this rework. The first thing would be the changes to his grouping skill, Larva. This one, to be honest, in the past was pretty lackluster because it was not recastable and it will stay on the field until you killed every single enemy that was caught inside it. Problem here was that a lot of the enemies really like to get stuck in the scenery, which makes it a huge pain in the butt to play. That is why, up to this point, it was basically necessary to use the Larva Burst augment for him, because only with that augment became Larva somewhat recastable. That was always a big problem with NIDUS, and now that the skill itself becomes recastable by default, that is going to be a huge plus. However though, not only the skill got overhauled, but also the Larva Burst augment in question. Now, what they say it does is, for every enemy grappled with Larva, you will inflict 1 toxin proc on every enemy grappled. So if you group up 10 enemies, that would mean each of those 10 enemies will get 10 toxin procs on them. And this is the secret genius of this augment going forward. What I mean here is that Larva is NIDUS' Helminth ability, so you can put this grouping tool on any other Warframe. In the past, to be fair, due to all the problems, I always recommended to not do that because it's a clunky ability. However, going forward, this change to the skill and the augment in specific might make it one of the strongest Helminth options in the game. Why is that? Well, on the one side, because it is recastable, it's not clunky anymore, and on the other side, with Larva infused, that also means every Warframe can use the Larva Burst augment. And if you combine that with Archon Continuity, which inflicts corrosive for every toxin proc inflicted with abilities, that means you now have a Helminth ability that not only groups up enemies very quickly, but armor strips them at the same time. Remember, if you grapple enough enemies, you're gonna inflict 10 or more toxin procs, potentially completely reducing enemy armor. This combination of grouping plus armor reduction I think is incredibly strong, which is why I wanted to mention it here. If you have any builds where you think this might be a useful tool, then definitely get yourself a copy of Larva Burst and Subsuma NIDUS so you have access to Larva as an infusion. As for the second part of the rework that I think will be very strong, that has to do with Parasitic Link. Also here, not going too much into the details, just to keep it short, Parasitic Link was a skill that allows you to either link yourself to an enemy or an ally. If you link to an ally, that will give you more weapon damage as well as ability strength. Changes here being that you can now also link to a free moving companion. So not a sentinel, but like hounds or biological critters, you know what I'm saying. This, I think, is very cool because it gives access to these strong weapon damage and ability strength buffs to solo players. So if that sounds good to you and you don't have a free moving companion just yet, then I think this would also something you would definitely want to do before the update so you can start using your NIDUS at maximum capacity right from the launch. But now let's get into the new Jade quest and the brand new Warframes. What the devs already announced is that in order to acquire the new Warframes, you will have to play the new post-quest Railjack content. This is going to include a new hub from which you can start 2 brand new Railjack missions. The catch with these missions being, though, that you cannot use your own Railjack for them, and instead you have to use the loaner Railjack that is provided by the game. On the one hand, that is of course nice for players who really don't want to engage with Railjack content, but on the other hand I would have really wished that I could at least have the option to use my own. That's, however, a discussion for another video. I don't want to get into that in the update preparation video right now. What I want to get into though is that even though we can't use our own Railjack directly, there is still a bunch of Railjack stuff that you can do in preparation of the update that will help you in the mission still. On the one hand, even though you can't use your own Railjack, I think whatever you've unlocked in your intrinsic skill trees for Railjack will still apply. So something like the pre-aim reticle or free moving 360 turrets or whatever, that is still probably going to come in very helpful. If you haven't done that yet, then I would highly recommend at least investing a little bit of playtime and upgrading your intrinsics. And just by the way, in case you have any question about Railjack whatsoever, I recently uploaded a behemoth of a 40-minute plus full Railjack guide going into all the important things regarding this game mode. However though, intrinsics are not everything. Usually, in Railjack content, you can also go and fly your Arcwing. So in case you don't like the idea of flying a pre-made Railjack, well, you could at least go and build a cracked out Arcwing as well as Archon. Maybe it's gonna come in handy with the mission, who knows. And then on that note too, we gotta remember that no matter which Railjack you're flying, the energy for the Railjack abilities is directly coupled to your Warframe's energy. This means that even with the loaner Railjack that you're going to play the mission with, having a Warframe that can infinitely replenish their own energy is going to make it very much easier to play this mission. I'm talking about someone like, for example, Protea with her dispensary, Lavos, who doesn't even need energy, he just has a couple of cooldowns, or also Noko, who is really good in Railjack with his energy replenishing mushroom. These 3 are definitely not the only ones you could use for Railjack, just as an example that it might be a good idea to have at least one Warframe with the energy replenishment feature to make the Railjack mission a lot more seamless. And then the last point in this chapter, if you are a Railjack connoisseur and you really like this game mode, then at least there will be something for you in this update too, because they announced that there will be a Steel Path version of the currently existing Railjack star chart. So, if that sounds any interesting to you, then now would be the time to really max out your Railjack, because I could imagine that the Steel Path version might be quite a bit challenging otherwise. The next chapter has to do with 5 brand new Incarnon weapons. These will launch with the update as well, and we're talking about the Vectis, Obex, Destreza, Ballistica, and the highly anticipated Stug Incarnon. For these weapons, we haven't seen gameplay footage of every one of them. However, we did see the Vectis and we did see the Stug, and both of them did look quite strong and interesting. If you want to see more of them and a whole discussion, I already have the dev stream recap. You could check it out later if you like. What I want to talk about here though is the way that you acquire them. What the devs have said is that even though the update launches on Wednesday, these new Incarnon weapons, they're not going to enter the Devira rotation next week on Wednesday when the update launches, but Monday in 2 weeks, which is a couple days later. That is when you're going to be able to regularly farm them. However, there is still a way to get them day 1, which would be the Cavallero shop on the Zeraman 10.0, where the developer said that you will be able to acquire these new weapons for Platinum the moment the update launches. However, this has one big implication. As per usual, in order to evolve an Incarnon weapon, you not only need the Incarnon adapter, but also a couple of Deviri resources. And if you wanted to, you could of course go and pre-farm those resources already, but the good thing is that due to the fact that the weapons already appear on the Cavallero shop on Wednesday, a couple of days before they enter the rotation, that means you will already be able to see which resources you need to evolve your weapon of choice, so you can pre-farm them after the update launches, so that you already have exactly what you need on the following Monday when they enter the Deviri rotation. In addition to the new Incarnon weapons though, we also finally get 4 new augments again. I'm a bit sad that the Shadow Grapher update didn't bring new augments, so I'm very happy to announce that we're gonna get 4 new ones. The developers already revealed that it's gonna be for Temple, Dante, Kome, and Noko, however they haven't revealed all of them yet, just the one for Temple and Dante. Now, for Dante, Noctua Swarm, this one I can't really call just yet because the description isn't really all that clear. I can't really imagine what that's gonna do and if it's gonna be strong or not. Definitely gonna test it out once the update launches, and if there need to be build adjustments, I will of course have a new Dante build out for you. However, what's much more interesting here in my opinion would be Rhythm Guard for Temple. This one makes it that whenever you perfectly cast an ability in sync with the metronome, you will gain a certain amount of overguard. This, in my opinion, is quite a useful augment, and it might change tempo builds a lot, because it means that you can potentially rely on overguard for your survivability and don't need health, armor, shields, and all that stuff anymore. If you consider yourself a temple enjoyer, this is definitely something to have on your radar. And in addition to that, for all the temple fans out there, let me tell you one thing: get yourself a maxed out Arcane Truculence before the update launches. In case you forgot, Arcane Truculence is a pretty niche arcane. It viral primes all the enemies in a large area around you, but in order to be triggered consistently, it requires the overguard of the Warframe to constantly go up and down in small increments. And even though there are a bunch of Warframes nowadays who have overguard, there's only really a select few where this incremental increase is really a thing. And with Rhythm Guard, Temple is for sure gonna be one of those frames. In case you want to know where to get it, this is a Hex Arcane, so you can get it from Helvania, where you can buy it for standing from Eleanor. You can get it from the 99 calendar, from Tech Rod saves in Helvania missions, from the Skuldra caches in Exterminate missions, from the Fervon tank in the Assassination. But you could also acquire it through Arcane Dissolution from Lloyd in the Sanctum Anatomica, where you will get it as part of the Hex Arcane packet. As for where you can acquire the 4 new augment mods themselves, that is a little bit unfortunate, because Temple, Dante, and Noko all never got an augment in the first place, so we don't know which syndicate they will be aligned with. Only for Kome, we know her augments will be available at the Arbiters of Hexes as well as New Loka. However though, regardless of the syndicate, I would highly recommend you to have all your syndicates maxed out with full standing when the update launches. If one of them then ends up having the new augment mods, that's good, because not only can you farm them for yourself, but I think especially in the first 2-3 days after release is a good way to make a quick buck. However though, not only do we get 4 new augments for Warframes, but also we will receive 4 brand new Arcanes. Also here though, unfortunately they haven't teased all of them just yet, only 2, but still I wanted to share one idea that I had here, which might be interesting to some of you. So far, the 2 Arcanes that they shared were Arcane Sculptor as well as Primary Compression. For Arcane Sculptor, I'm gonna be 100% honest, I don't really think it's gonna play a huge role in the present day meta, because ability efficiency is just usually the dump stat on like 90% of the Warframe builds. Kinda sad because I like the idea behind it. However though, Primary Compression, oh boy, I could imagine this one to be, a bit niche, but still very strong whenever it can be applied properly. What this one does is, it's basically an arcane for primary weapons with a large blast radius. The arcane then will reduce the explosion radius by 80%, however, for every meter of radius lost by this, you will gain plus 100% damage and also a bit of ammo efficiency. This, I think, could be really darn strong when combined with Warframes that have grouping abilities. I don't know, maybe something like a reworked NIDUS for example. This way, when the enemies are tightly bunched up, the loss in blast radius isn't really all that important, but especially on something like, for example, the Kuva Ogress, that could be absolutely huge, especially when coupled with the Nightwatch Napalm augment. So, in case you like Warframes with grouping abilities, then you might wanna maybe already prepare a couple of builds that can incorporate this arcane. Unfortunately though, when it comes to these new arcanes, they're probably not going to be farmable via arcane packs from Arcane Dissolution, because it usually takes some time until those packs get introduced in that shop. In case that was your plan, then I would say don't spend all that much time on Voss for farming just yet. It's probably unfortunately not going to do much when the update launches. And now also, don't miss my updated 2026 to-do list for all Warframe daily and weekly tasks right here. Another massive shoutout to Niels V, Demon Lord Zell, Demon Emperor, Emperor Prime, Nas Linux Gaming, Turtlepeer, Underkanio2, Skyla Bowser, Mihawki, Socrates the Almighty Rat, Leo Murasaki, Shadow Lockhart, Hantagas, Patrosator, Boomia1, Mr. Games Plays, Zave, Awenai, Azengen, Quax, Henrik5984, Blue Eagle 98, Hearthwield, Everin8802, Gabriel Tevez, Jaco Ivan Gonzalez, Candy Fox 19, Argentat, and all other generous channel members for your continuous support. We see each other hopefully in the next one, and until then, as always, good loot.